Welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When I returned to my family's 640-acre ranch, I expected peace and dirt roads, not a power-hungry HOA president in heels trying to evict me from land we've owned since 1930. She called the sheriff. Bad move. What followed? Drones, fire, court drama, and one very heroic goat. There's something eerie about returning to a place that once held your entire childhood, especially when it's been left untouched for years. As I steered my old pickup down the gravel road that led to Harper Ranch, I could feel the weight of memory in every jolt and bump. The gates were just as rusty as I remembered, and the fence had surrendered long ago to time and neglect. But beyond it, the land stretched wide and proud. 640 acres of stubborn, dry Texas soil that had somehow survived droughts, windstorms, and, apparently, decades of bureaucracy. This land wasn't just property, it was legacy. My grandfather carved our family name into the bark of that old post oak tree in 1930, Harper's 1930, and every Harper since had walked under its shade like it was a chapel. My dad used to say the roots of that tree ran deeper than the county line, and I believed him. I still do. When he passed, I didn't hesitate. I packed up my life in Houston, my career, my apartment, my neat little gym membership, and came home. The house was rough. The porch leaned like a drunk cowboy, windows broken by wind or time or both, and the barn looked like one stiff breeze might carry it into the next zip code. But standing there on the creaking front steps, the sun dipping behind the hill, and the sound of cicadas rising up like an old song, I didn't feel regret. I felt something closer to belonging. I had a toolbox in the back seat, a generator in the trailer, and a plan to rebuild everything from the ground up. No contractors, no committees, just me, my hands, and 100 years of family grit beneath my boots. And that's when I noticed it. Subtle at first, like a stain you can't scrub out. New homes, roofs, streets with names like Crescent Elm and Sunrise Way. They were visible now through a gap in the tree line where the land sloped down. A gated community, cookie-cutter houses stacked in neat little grids like a plastic Monopoly board. I hadn't seen that on the old maps. I figured they were just nearby neighbors. The world moved on while I was away. I got that. Suburbs spread like mold. As long as they kept to their side of the fence, I wasn't going to raise a fuss. But part of me felt the hair on the back of my neck rise. The next day, I started clearing the porch and found the old deed inside my father's safe, still in its cracked leather sleeve. Land grant, 1930, cattle rights, mineral rights, water rights. It was all there, all signed, all sealed. He'd even kept a file of property surveys dating back to the Roosevelt administration, the old man. There were letters from the county clerk confirming this land had never been enrolled in any development zone. No covenants, no restrictions, no HOA. Harper land had stood independent since the Depression, and that wasn't going to change just because someone decided to build a cul-de-sac nearby. Later that evening, as I sat on the porch with a cold beer and Goober, the goat I adopted from a shelter in Amarillo, chewing through a sack of feed, I allowed myself to believe I'd found peace. Real bone-deep peace. I didn't know that less than 24 hours later, that peace would come knocking, in heels with a clipboard and a smile that could cut glass. It started with the sound of tires crunching gravel, too clean, too precise to belong to any ranch truck. I glanced up from the rusted pump I was fixing and saw a sleek white Tesla Model X gliding through the gate, like it owned the place. The vehicle stopped a few yards from where I stood, and out stepped a woman in tailored slacks and a pastel blazer, her hair styled into tight blonde curls that didn't dare move in the wind. She walked like someone who expected the earth to make way for her heels. In one hand, she held a leather portfolio. In the other, an iPad she tapped with theatrical purpose. "Mr. Clayton Harper," she asked, her voice high-pitched and clipped like a school principal with a god complex. "Who's askin'?" I replied, wiping my hands on a rag and standing up slowly, mostly to gauge just how deep in nonsense I was about to step. "I'm Marilyn Chandler, president of the Stone Pines Vista Homeowners Association," she said, flashing a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We need to talk about your property's compliance status." That sentence alone told me we weren't going to be friends. Compliance? I raised an eyebrow. "This is private land. Been in my family for nearly a century." "Yes, well," she said, already scrolling through a digital document. "According to the most recent regional development plan filed with the county, Your parcel now falls within the extended jurisdiction of Stone Pines Vista. We were expecting proper registration following your father's passing. Since you failed to register within the transition period, your residency is now considered non-compliant under HOA Code 3.7. I blinked. Lady, this ain't a condo in Miami. It's a ranch. There's no HOA here. She gave a chuckle that could curdle milk. Oh, Mr. Harper, your maps must be a bit outdated. Since the 2023 zoning revisions, this land is classified under Sector B of our Controlled Development Plan. That means you're subject to our bylaws, setbacks, approved exterior modifications, animal code, irrigation limits. I cut her off. You're telling me my ranch, my land, with a deed older than Elvis, now belongs to some committee with a newsletter and a lawn police? Her tone sharpened. Your main house has not been approved under community aesthetic standards. The fencing is non-standard. There's visible rust on the mailbox. The barn violates height limitations for outbuildings. And She glanced behind me. Is that a goat? Yep, I said, reaching down to scratch Goober behind the ears. He's the official welcome committee. Marilyn pursed her lips like she'd just licked a lemon. I'm giving you 10 days to either submit your application to join Stone Pines Vista HOA or vacate the premises. Failure to do so will result in legal enforcement. I stared at her, making sure she was serious. She was. Well, I said calmly, you can take your Sector B zoning and file it wherever your sunroof doesn't shine. Her smile faltered. I walked past her, back to my tools, done with the conversation. As I bent to pick up a wrench, I heard her call out, I hope you understand what kind of trouble you're inviting. I turned and gave her a slow, flat stare. Ma'am, I grew up on this land. The kind of trouble I'm used to doesn't wear heels and drive a Tesla. With that, she got back in her electric chariot and rolled off like a parade float for the absurd. But I didn't laugh. Not yet. I knew that look in her eye. Marilyn Chandler wasn't the type to give up just because a man told her no. She was just getting started. 3 days after the drive-by decree from Marilyn Chandler, I was hauling feed sacks into the barn when I noticed a county cruiser kicking up dust on the long driveway. I knew the silhouette before the lights even hit the porch. Black Stetson, mirrored sunglasses, star badge on the chest like a target. It was Deputy Ron Talbert, a man I hadn't seen in over a decade but who hadn't changed a bit. Same drawl, same don't want to be here energy. He stepped out slow, like he was waiting for a tumbleweed to cue his entrance. One hand on his belt, the other tipping his hat. "Mornin', Clay," he called. I nodded, wiping sweat off my brow. "Didn't expect company. Let me guess, Stone Pines." He gave a small sigh and nodded. "Got a formal complaint filed yesterday. Says you're squatting on unregistered land inside HOA jurisdiction. Claims you're refusing compliance and obstructing community development." I laughed. It wasn't a joyful laugh, more of a "we really doing this" kind of laugh. "Come on in," I said, leading him toward the house. "Let me introduce you to the ghosts of Harper past." Inside, I pulled the leather-bound case from the drawer, Dad's sacred archive. I laid it on the dining table like a war chest, snapping open the brass latches. Ron leaned over, one eyebrow raised. First came the original 1930 land deed, signed by my great-grandfather and a state official with a fountain pen. Then the registry stamps from every decade since, 48, 61, 87, all the way up to 2018. Then the water rights agreement, issued by the county in the 50s and renewed in 1999. I even showed him a letter from the zoning office dated 4 years ago, stating in clear, bold print, "This property is not subject to any residential development restrictions or HOA boundaries." And then, my personal favorite, a sepia-toned photo of my granddad standing in front of the post oak with Harper's 1930 carved into it, wearing a hat twice the size of his head, holding a rifle and squinting at the sun like it owed him money. Ron flipped through the pages slowly. He wasn't the type to show emotion, but the corner of his mouth twitched. He closed the folder, gave a small nod, and turned toward the door. That's when I heard it, the unmistakable squeal of low-profile tires on gravel. I peeked out the window. "Oh, hell," I muttered. Look what the wind blew back. Marilyn Chandler in full HOA battle gear, cream-colored blazer, patent leather pumps, and a manila envelope held like it contained the 10 Commandments. She marched right up to the porch like she paid the taxes on it. "Deputy," she said, without acknowledging me, "I assume you're here to begin the eviction protocol." Ron scratched his head. "No, ma'am." I've reviewed documentation proving clear, uninterrupted ownership of this land. Mr. Harper's claim is airtight. She blinked once. That's not possible. Our maps say, I don't care what your maps say. Ron cut in, a rare sharpness in his tone. The county's records trump any PowerPoint presentation you brought to your HOA bake sale. I stifled a chuckle. Goober snorted from behind me. Even the goat had opinions. But Marilyn? She wasn't done. This man is obstructing progress, she barked. This eyesore of a barn is visible from Suncrest Lane. His goat is vocal. And yesterday, I witnessed a clothesline. I couldn't help myself. You saw cloth, drying, on a line, on a ranch. It lowers property values. Ron turned toward me, exasperated, then looked back at her. Ma'am, unless you're here to press charges for excessive clothes drying, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. You'll regret this, she hissed, pointing a lacquered nail at both of us. Stone Pines has legal recourse. You haven't heard the last of this. She turned on her heel and stomped down the porch like a general retreating from a battle she thought she'd win in one round. After the Tesla disappeared in a cloud of entitlement, Ron exhaled hard. Gonna be one of those years, huh? I nodded. Think you just made the list. He gave a dry chuckle, tipped his hat, and walked off. I stood there, the evening breeze cooling the sweat on my neck, the weight of generations humming in my bones. I knew it then. This wasn't over. Marilyn Chandler wasn't just fighting me. She was going to try and erase everything my family built. I didn't hear from Marilyn Chandler for about a week after the sheriff's visit. Part of me hoped she'd come to her senses. Maybe she'd found some yoga retreat and screamed into enough throw pillows to let it go. I focused on fixing up the barn roof and patching the chicken wire around the old coop. Goober the goat found a way to climb onto the porch roof and had developed the odd hobby of staring menacingly at passing cars like some kind of rustic gargoyle. It was peaceful, in a weird, slightly chaotic kind of way. Then, one morning, I got a certified letter from the county zoning office. Inside was a folded copy of a revised jurisdictional development plan with a neat red circle drawn around my ranch, labeling it as Sector B Expansion Stone Pines Vista HOA. My name wasn't on it. No notification, no signature. Just a stamp and a polite "for your records." I damn near dropped my coffee. I drove straight to the zoning office, dusty boots and all, and waited 2 hours in a lobby that smelled like copier toner and government apathy. Finally, I got ushered into a tiny windowless room with a city planner named Brent, ponytail, glasses, about 25, and clearly unprepared for someone like me. Mr. Harper, he said brightly, gesturing to a seat. We've had a few inquiries about that Sector B designation. Nothing to worry about, just standard alignment updates for community coherence. Community coherence? I asked. That's some new code word for land theft? He blinked like I'd spoken in Morse code. Well, the HOA submitted amended maps back in February. They included your parcel under the assumption that, you were transitioning ownership and the property was functionally inactive. That gave them temporary jurisdictional leverage for annexation under the updated municipal guidelines. In English, he fidgeted. They snuck you into their map and no one noticed. I stared at him. And no one thought to check a deed from the actual landowner. Well, technically they're supposed to, but the HOA's filing came in with a full infrastructure development proposal and a business plan that included community green spaces. So it moved quickly. I couldn't believe it. Marilyn had filed a fake map, presented a vision board of yoga decks and meditation trails using my land, and the county just rubber stamped it. I demanded a full investigation. It took a few days, but once I got my lawyer, Rosa Villarreal, involved, things picked up steam. Rosa was a West Texas bulldog in a blazer, and within 48 hours she had county officials digging through planning meeting minutes like their pensions depended on it. Turns out, not only had Marilyn submitted fake development borders, but she also misrepresented ownership status, claiming the property was in probate and therefore subject to transitional oversight, which, of course, was complete and utter nonsense. I still remember sitting at Rosa's office, watching her scroll through emails from HOA board members. One thread had a subject line that read, "What if he never notices?" Another said, "Can we submit before the estate transfer finishes? If so, we might get the zoning window." I laughed. I couldn't help it. They really thought they could bureaucrat me off my land. But the best part? Someone, some brave soul with a conscience, leaked the whole zoning plan to a local reporter. By the end of the week, the headline read, HOA tries to swallow family ranch in quiet land grab, owner fights back. And just like that, Maryland's cute little power play turned into a county-wide scandal. I've seen a lot of bold things in my life. Tornado chasers in Oklahoma, drunk cattle riding lawn mowers down Main Street, but nothing quite prepared me for the week Marilyn Chandler went full HOA rogue. It started with the drone. One evening, just after sunset, I was sipping coffee on the porch while Goober lounged nearby, his belly rising and falling like a furry hillock. Then I heard the faint mosquito whine of a quadcopter, looked up, and sure enough, there it was. Small, black, hovering like a nosy wasp just over my barn. At first I thought maybe it was some kid from the new development. Then I saw the letters SPVHOA stamped right there on the side in white. Subtle, right? The drone flew in low, circled the house, zipped around my water tank, and even hovered in front of a second-story window before retreating. I threw a rock at it. Missed. Goober didn't. He leapt onto a hay bale, then launched himself like a goat-shaped cannonball straight into the air, hit the drone mid-flight. The thing went spiraling into the trough with a pathetic splash. Goober climbed down, soaked and smug, like he'd just defended the Alamo. I thought that'd be the end of it. I was wrong. 3 nights later, around 1 a.m., I woke up to the unmistakable crackle of fire. I bolted outside barefoot, heart pounding. The old equipment shed near the southern fence line was engulfed in flames, bright orange tongues licking the sky, casting shadows that danced across the field like something out of a nightmare. I grabbed the hose, but it was no use. The place was dry as dust. By the time the volunteer fire crew arrived, it was a smoldering skeleton of scorched lumber and melted steel. Thank God nothing spread to the livestock. The next morning, the fire chief pulled me aside. "Doesn't look natural," he muttered, pulling a half-melted gas can from the wreckage. Accelerant was used. Deliberate. That's when it hit me. Marilyn, or someone doing her dirty work. I checked my security footage, and sure enough, around 12:45 a.m., a shadowy figure in a hoodie walks across the property. You can't see a face, but the silhouette is tall, slender, and, get this, wearing heels. I'd recognize that haughty gait anywhere. She moves like someone who believes the sidewalk was invented for her. I gave the footage to Rosa, and she nearly exploded. "This isn't just overreach anymore," she said. "This is criminal trespass, surveillance harassment, and now, attempted arson." To make matters worse, I got a letter the next day from the HOA's legal team stating that my dilapidated shed posed a fire hazard to adjacent homeowners and that they were relieved the situation resolved without further liability. They were trying to make it look like I started it. It would have been funny if it weren't so twisted. That's when I knew this wasn't just about land or zoning anymore. This was war, and I had a goat, a lawyer, and a whole lot of receipts. You'd think after arson, drone warfare, and enough legal threats to fill a library, Marilyn Chandler might have tapped the brakes. Nope, she doubled down. Filed a civil suit alleging community disruption, violation of aesthetic standards, unauthorized agricultural activity, and public nuisance via ungated livestock presence. Translation: my goat made too much noise, and my barn wasn't beige enough. So, with enough evidence to bury a city council and a team of reporters now following every twist like it was the Super Bowl, we finally landed in the courtroom. The trial was set in Travis County Civil Court, a building that smelled like air conditioning and tension. As I walked in with Rosa, wearing my only pressed shirt in a belt buckle my grandfather once wore to the county fair, Marilyn was already seated at the plaintiff's table, flanked by 2 attorneys in matching suits and fake southern drawls. She looked at me like I'd tracked mud into a cathedral. The judge, Honorable Barbara J. "Don't waste my time," Jones, entered like a storm cloud in heels. She was known for cutting through nonsense like a chainsaw through balsa wood. Rosa stood first, outlining our case. Original land deeds, chain of ownership, historical exemption, photos of the post oak, fire report, drone footage, and, yes, Goober's heroic takedown as a bonus exhibit. The courtroom chuckled when she played the slow-mo of the goat body slamming the HOA drone. Even the judge smiled. Then came the HOA's turn. Their lead attorney, a man named Chip, of course, strolled up like he was auditioning for a courtroom drama. He held up a glossy rendering of a future wellness center and said with a straight face, Ladies and gentlemen, imagine a tranquil walking trail where there now sits a rusting barn. Imagine serenity instead of livestock noise. That is what my client sought. Rosa rose slowly. Your Honor, opposing counsel just argued they wanted to replace a century-old family ranch with a smoothie bar and yoga mats. Laughter again. The judge banged her gavel once. Then came the cross-examinations. They tried to paint me as hostile, reclusive, and resistant to progress. Marilyn testified that she feared for her safety every time Goober stared at her from the fence line. When asked if she entered my property at any point without permission, she said, "Only when necessary, for visual inspections." Rosa pounced. "So you admit to trespassing, surveying private land, and reporting false jurisdictional claims to the zoning office without ever verifying ownership?" Marilyn's silence said it all. Then came the bombshell. Rosa called Brent, the nervous city planner, as a witness. Under oath, he admitted the HOA provided modified development boundaries without proper vetting and that he felt pressured to approve quickly. When asked by Rosa who applied that pressure, Ms. Chandler. She said time was critical and that she had county support. The judge's face darkened. Did she? No, ma'am, he said quietly. It was over. The jury didn't even need a full day. Unanimous verdict. HOA found guilty of fraudulent misrepresentation, malicious zoning manipulation, criminal trespass, harassment, and attempted property annexation through deceit. Marilyn personally fined. HOA ordered to pay $750,000 in damages, plus court costs. County Zoning Office mandated to issue formal apology and correctional notice, acknowledging that Harper Ranch would remain forever outside HOA jurisdiction. As I stood outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. I gave a quick nod, then said the only thing I could. My goat and I thank you for your time. Goober naturally head-butted a microphone. A month after the trial, Harper Ranch looked a little different. The mailbox was repainted in fire truck red, Goober's idea. The front gate now had two new signs. The first, hand-carved from old cedar, read, Harper Ranch, Esther 1930. Still not an HOA. And just beneath it, in smaller letters, burned in with a branding iron, unauthorized HOA agents will be fed to the goat. Tourists from town started taking selfies with it. Some even brought carrots for Goober, who took to posing proudly in his new custom-made baseball cap, stitched with the words Drone Slayer. I didn't make that up. A local feed store had them printed. I still don't know who put the idea on Instagram, but the video of Goober's takedown went viral. At last count, it had over 4 million views, and a remix with dramatic music and slow motion. He's now something of a regional legend. I was approached about licensing his image. I told them sure, as long as he gets creative control. Stone Pines Vista HOA, on the other hand, was busy licking its wounds. Marilyn Chandler resigned from her position to focus on her spiritual journey, according to the HOA newsletter, which now read more like a community therapy journal. Word is she moved to Arizona to start an essential oil business. Honestly, it tracks. The new HOA president, a retired teacher named Glenn, came by one afternoon with a pie and a handshake. He said, "We were all a little blind. Thank you for standing up." I told him I wasn't mad at the neighborhood, just the nonsense. He nodded solemnly. "We banned drones," he added, "and goats are now officially protected under Stone Pines Wildlife Courtesy Policy." I didn't even know that was a thing, but I appreciated it. To celebrate the victory, I threw a big ranch barbecue. Everyone was invited, Stone Pines folks included. We had brisket, sweet tea, live music, and Goober judging the pie contest by trying to eat the pies. No one argued with his choices, especially after he head-butted the blueberry one into a folding chair. I stood at the porch near sunset, watching families laugh, kids running wild, smoke from the grill curling into the orange sky. The same porch my dad used to sit on, beer in hand, telling me, "This land's only yours if you're willing to stand on it when it counts." I smiled, because I had, and because it turns out, sometimes all it takes to bring a community together is one ornery goat, one honest deed, and one man too stubborn to back down. As the last song played and the fire pit crackled, Goober climbed a hay bale and stood proudly against the twilight, silhouetted like a furry statue of liberty. Someone yelled, "Hey Clayton, will Goober be running for HOA president next?" Without missing a beat, I yelled back, Only if he promises no yoga trails and open grazing rights. The crowd erupted in laughter, and just like that, peace settled over Harper Ranch again, for now.